that I saw was Mama's face. I began to sing a song that I never sung in my life.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen?
Hello, mother.
Hello, mother.
I done made
I'm taking back old school with y'all today on this beautiful Sunday morning.
oh, mother.
So we got a nice topic today.
I done made oh, and I don't know about you, but sometimes
Anybody had to cry sometimes? Man, it's Coffee and Cannabis. I'm your boy Goodbody. I got a special guest today. We're gonna go in on the book of Job, get into some esoteric and exoteric meanings. Shout out to all the mothers out there, because we're definitely gonna channel some powerful mother energy today. So ironically, there's a feminine presence that doesn't get mentioned a lot in this story, and we're gonna investigate it today. So without further ado, I want to introduce a good friend of mine, my buddy, Mr. Zach Zorba. What's up, buddy?
How are you? How are you? Good to be here. I like the intro.
Yeah,
I like the
appreciate
music.
that.
I like setting the intention.
Yeah,
I'm excited. Yeah, I think we're each going to bring something really different to this discussion, which is very fun, and I think it might be one of the most relevant discussions I think in Scripture to be had today.
yeah, yeah.
That's even though it's probably one of the most overlooked books, I think it's one of the most important, especially given the amount of grief and anguish and theological challenges that have occurred over the last year or so. So I'm excited.
Why is this is what why is this story so meaningful to you?
That is a good question. So when I was in college, I wanted to write my thesis paper, understanding from like a theological perspective why bad things happen to good people. And this was motivated by initially my brother, who passed away from cancer when we were in high school, and then that led to a life pursuit of understanding like tragedy and trauma, and then I confronted one of my advisors, and I said, this is the topic I want to do, and he said, you should not do this topic. And I said, yeah, but this is the one I want to do. And and so yeah, there's a lot to it, and I think it really delves into when things go wrong, the right and the wrong ways to think about how to put it in the right path.
Right,
That's how I understand this book as a whole.
right.
Let me. I'm going to mute and set this intention right. I know you're.
Oh yeah. So with on Coffee and Cannabis, we set an intention. Well, this is something new because I haven't been consistent with a ritual, but we're gonna do it today with you, bro. So we got our bong. We're gonna take one dab with the intention of going deep into the spiritual meaning of this message, so that we can have a beautiful discussion about truth. So my boy got his stuff ready. I think
Amen, amen. Got the Alaska Jew. We've got Brandon, the good body. Here we go.
Yes,
L'chaim, as we say.
What is it?
L'chaim, to life.
Okay. So
I'm just a soul whose intentions are good.
yes,
So
sir.
Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
Okay.
All right.
So okay, I'm gonna start with you, bro. So
yeah.
So just on a like a quick breakdown or summary of this story. You're a writer, so give me a quick synopsis or a nice pitch or treatment
Yeah. So here's we'll give without what I see as the bigger context and implications of the story, and we'll just
Mhm.
break it down to the way I see it, really basic. So um, Satan and God are having a discussion, and Satan is basically trying to start a bet where he's trying to say like, um, I know you think that everybody who follows you is really loyal and faithful, but choose someone who you think is really faithful and loyal, and I'll show you that once you start to introduce some difficulty into their life, they're gonna turn against you. And God's like, no, that's not gonna happen. And so Satan says, all right, well, choose somebody. So he goes, well, look at Job. Job is like, he's got money, he's got a great family, he's got good values, he follows in my ways. So doesn't really matter what happens to him, he's going to be fine. So then, and again, I haven't studied it in the text for a while, but my recollection is, all of the Jobian like things start happening to him. His business fails, his family starts to get sick. I believe he loses, or all of his kids end up passing away from disease, and he loses his fortune. And I don't remember if his wife died or not. You can remind me of that, but basically everything goes wrong in his life, so to speak. And then where I think it gets super interesting, because I think this is what's happening now in many ways, is he has three friends come visit him, and they all try to comfort him by trying to rationalize what's
Right.
going on. So they're like,
Right.
well, I know you seem like a good guy, but maybe you
You
like,
did something wrong.
yeah, you might have, you might have been, you didn't pay your workers on time, or you spoke
Right.
poorly about somebody. He's like, no, that's not the case.
Right.
Or maybe God's doing it to teach us a bigger lesson. Or the point is, it's the always or maybe, and like for me, well, okay. So actually, I don't want to get into the other stuff. So we're just breaking down the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Job basically says, "No, you're wrong, and this isn't helpful." And at the end, which I think is just, I mean, from the writer, dramatic filmmaking standpoint, is like amazing. Joe basically says, "Look, I don't know what the hell is going on, God, but like, this is insane. You have violated your pact with me and humanity itself," which I
Mhm.
think is a discussion to talk about later. And then he goes, "Why? Why are you doing this?" And then God's answer is like the biggest mic drop in history, and he's just like, or God is just like, do you know how the sun goes up and goes down every day, and how the birds, you know, interact with the flower, like
Right. Right. Right.
every layer of nature that we as human beings we totally get lost, especially when something goes wrong in our own four walls or whatever.
Mhm.
That we don't know how to zoom out and see a bigger picture, and we take it only personally, and therefore our responses to it are very personal and also very limited.
You
So,
know something in that I want to speak to real quick. There's a verse in that conversation that never gets um stood out as what is God really saying right here,
mhm,
because the way I got it growing up was maybe God's just being sarcastic because that's how humans act. But
mm,
I don't think when the writer was writing the story that he was speaking in an American, you know, hypocritical or sarcastic way. And
right,
there's a verse in chapter 38 when God is asking him, like, do you like were you here with the foundations and all this stuff? And
right.
at the end, he said, but of course you do know all of this, for you were born before it was all created, and you are so very experienced. Why did he tell him that?
I want to
That
look at it in Hebrew. Yeah, hold on. What? I'm going to it. It's 30. What verse?
38 and 21.
Okay, so 38. Benanaville. So wait. 30, chapter 8. Sorry,
No,
chapter 30.
chapter 38, verse 21.
Oh, chapter 38. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a long. It's a long book too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've studied it. Yeah, talking about intentions and other things. I've studied it in a couple different formats, and I wanted to also, and I forgot this in the moment, but a man who's passed away a few years ago. His name was Herb Weisberg. He was very quiet. He kind of dressed like Don Amici, or he reminded me of Don Amici from like Coming to America, like the old comedies. But he would always wear like an ascot and like a sailor hat at the synagogue, and he and I studied this for a little while, and he would share some of his like scholarship with me. So I wanted to, in his memory, also
Nice.
bring that to him. Okay. Oh yeah. Surely you know, for you were born then, and the number of your years is many. So yadata ki az tivaled umisparim harabim. Yeah.
So
Yeah. But he actually doesn't say experience. He talks about knowledge and years.
right.
Just so we, now you got the Hebrew guy here, so we're gonna check the text. But I think that's an interesting. I actually had a question for you. So I'm assuming that you grew up in a pretty biblically oriented world, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I did as well. But like, we didn't really talk about Job at all. And I'm kind of interested. Is it something that in your house or in your church or sphere or whatever? Was it something that people like? Is it one of the more common stories that it's discussed?
No, it used to be in the 90s. Because
Interesting.
and I think the reason why is so, in your situation, you probably grew up with being able to translate text. We didn't have that.
Right.
And I grew up in an area in Alabama that the church was built on a plantation. So, that's the start of it right there. So they're not going to give you, anything other than what's in the book that they handed you at the church. So
Right.
whatever it says in here, interpret it based off of that. And so the church was built in the late 1800s. And it started to blossom later on in the 1900s. But given that this is a group of people who have only experienced what Job is experiencing, I'm experiencing loss all the time. Like the graveyard is full of dead bodies. People are dying, people are sick, people are still enslaved, people. So they're using this story as their narrative to say, if you just believe God, then he'll repay you back double for all this loss you're taking right now. So that was the only narrative we got of the
interesting
story.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that was when you asked me so I'd like to say the paper that I wrote on this was pretty good in college, but my professor called me out for what you just said, and it's something that resonates in my mind. I don't know how many years later, about 10, yeah. But that basically this book in its entirety is a direct contradiction to the scripture, in which I believe is in Deuteronomy, in what we would call Parshat Akev, where it says, if you follow the laws, you get rewarded. If you don't, you get punished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this this directly contradicts that.
Right.
So so it's interesting, and it contextually makes sense what you're saying. And also, I mean, I think a whole story about your church sounds really interesting to me, like, because how different schools of thought are born out from the same, like, original form based on the world in which it is. To me, I always just find super fascinating. So even when you're telling me, I was like, whoa. But I wrote this whole paper, and I was like trying to like justify the fact that Job gets punished for being a good guy. And I was trying to say, well, like you said, if he has faith and he had faith and he didn't really lose faith, then it's all good. Well, the reality is it's not all good. And that's what makes
Right.
and that's what makes this book so interesting. And I think what makes going on in the world so interesting, because a lot of people who didn't do anything wrong are being visibly wrecked by what's going on. You know what I mean? And then
And
yeah,
can I say this?
yeah,
And this, there's a narrative that the narrative of Satan and the devil is that none of this has anything to do with you, but there's a force that is creating all of this. But God is allowing this force to happen. So you're kind of at the mercy of just figuring out how to be whatever God is telling you to be. So this thing will get off your back. And on a deeper level, with the concept of good and bad, God and the devil, Satan and Jesus, if these are all different spiritual aspects of the soul or ourself, then if we internalize those things and see, it's just like a movie. Like, in
yeah.
order for you to see the truth in the movie, you have to see yourself in all of the roles. You know what I mean? The Joker
Well,
is just as much as the hero as Batman, but they're both the villain because they're still fighting their truth through pain and not, allowing themselves to be true.
yeah. Yeah,
You
no,
know?
that's very true. Not to overuse that word, but no, but that made me think of another thing, which I'm also curious. You
Mm,
know, the equivalent in my community for that is like when we talk about things like the Holocaust, when we talk about huge, obvious, terrible demonstrations of humanity or inhumanity, really.
mm,
Um, there are there are different ways to talk about it. And I think, like in Job, what happens is the way that his friends talk about it is, well, somebody must have done something in an earlier life or an earlier thing. And it's like, are you going to tell me that, the however many million kids or people who were just like, brought into a gas, like that's insane. You can't tell me that there's a responsibility or a culpability based on that. You know
right,
what I mean?
right,
And if you can, that's a big rabbit hole to go down. And so I what I've been noticing is like every attempt when something goes wrong, especially with the media or nowadays, it's like people need, and what you're talking about, not living in the pain, is like people need to immediately come up with that reason that they could like
mhm.
wrap their mind around. And it's like, I don't think it's so simple sometimes. You know
It's
what I
not
mean?
that simple.
And
Yeah.
and the pain certainly isn't so simple. Um, but I was also just wondering, does that in your church, in your community, in your world, do you see that happen? And are you like, because I know, I mean, you and I, like, whenever we talk, it gets deep fast. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering,
Yeah.
like, I observe it so much, and it's hard for me to even talk about because people don't even want to accept the fact, like you're talking about, that there is just pain. I'm just wondering how you see that in the world or in this context.
Which part?
Just the idea of when something is terrible and it's
Mhm,
obvious that it's terrible,
mhm.
and then the first thing people around you try to do is explain it
Why it's
so that
terrible.
they could, yeah, so that
Right.
they could put it in a box
Mhm.
and be, and like, okay, well, now we've explained it,
Right, right,
like,
right, right, right. Oh
um
man. Oh man. And it's good that we're having this conversation because a lot of people need to be deprogrammed from people constantly doing that to them, even from childhood.
yeah.
Um, I mean that happens in not just the church, but at school, but at
Hmm.
home.
Yeah.
And a lot of time it's adults who don't know the answer, but too insecure to say I don't know and trying to find the answer just so they can seem to the child that they're smarter. And which is terrible. Is not healthy.
Right.
Um, but in the church that I grew up in, and I'm far removed from
Right.
that way of thinking now, but it was always about Satan. Anything something terrible is happening, it's because either we're sinning too much, we're not listening to God. It was sounding like all the Job's friends. You're not listening to him, you did something wrong, or he's trying to test you. And it's like, why keep testing me? And you brought me here. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it never like a concrete answer, but it never came to this though. And this is something I'm learning in therapy.
Yeah.
Is whatever you're dealing with internally, you're gonna manifest that externally. It's so simple.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's so universal.
Right.
And we get so caught up, I think, and I mean, we're programmed. It's so hard for people to understand, especially now in the last, I mean, I think we're roughly the same age, you and I, that like, really since, I think it was like since 9/11 until now, the way
Mm,
news has like forced, at least I've experienced that way, also could just be our ages, so we become more aware of it, possible. But
yeah.
like the inundation of news that is also like, we realized maybe a week or so after was someone's opinion, but it's too late, that it's already impacted us, it's already formed us, it's already put us in an angry direction, it's already like, it's so scary because I have the same positive conversations with all sorts of people and they all recognize it. But then you go home and you look at these like, these dopamine centers,
Right.
and they and all of them is to make you feel worse. Like the more likes you get, the worse you feel,
Right.
the emptier you feel, you know what I mean? So it's like very odd that you're going for the likes, but it's not getting you anywhere. And we become removed, and it's so freaking, I mean, it's just scary, you know what I mean? Because like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I didn't grow up in Alabama. I grew up in Seattle mostly. So it was like
Mm.
different anyway, but now it just like, man,
Yeah.
we're just being taught hatred all of a sudden without understanding that that's what we're being taught, which is the scariest,
Yeah.
sometimes the scariest part. And you're right.
Which
What?
go ahead.
No. Go.
Which is it's so great. I love how this is flowing because you just brought up that hate, but then that's where it goes in the book of Job because God starts to do this whole rant about Leviathan. And Leviathan, from my understanding, in Hebrew is a mythological, kind of serpent creature from the water.
Yeah.
But in other cultures around the world, we got the same similar story of, the Kundalini or the serpent or, chaos energy. And so on a deeper esoteric level, they're talking about this feminine energy, not just about a woman, but that's why I
Yeah.
brought up Kali.
Yeah.
Because Leviathan and Kali they have the same symbolic story. They represent this mother energy that is powerful. It's a freaking killer,
Yeah.
but it only kills to protect her children. So it's out of love, but she's also a nurturer. And so then we go on Job, and God is explaining to Job, like, yo, look how powerful this thing is coming out of the water. It has where is it? Let me go to it real quick.
Yeah. Oh God.
Uh who could pry open its jaws? For its teeth are terrible. Its scales are like rows of shields, tightly sealed together. They are so close together that no air can get between them. It starts off in 41. He says, "Can you catch Leviathan with a hook or put a noose around its jaw?" He's asking a question. "Can you tie it with the rope through the nose or pierce its jaw with a spike? It will beg for mercy or implore will it beg for mercy or will it implore for pity?" And as I'm reading that, you know what I'm picturing? That scene in the movie Avatar where Jake Sully has to attach himself to the thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, nah, this thing will hurt you and it's powerful, but it will let you ride with it if you learn how to connect with it. And I think that's something into that with this story too, about you got a lot of shit inside of you, and that shit is going to create a whirlwind of chaos and trauma around you. And you talk about spirituality and talking about, challenging God, but God says in this story, if you can't even channel that Leviathan in you, how could we even have a conversation? And so if me and you are a reflection of this divine source, God, right? But we're arguing with one another because of, whatever insecurities or or anxiety is in the way, that's that Leviathan coming up and destroying the moment. You know what I mean? And
Well,
we have to put it on a noose and handle it like, no, let me pull that down. There's nothing to be afraid of. Everything is safe. I'm not in fear. Let me take a deep breath so I can still be present in the moment and have a conversation. And being present in the moment, isn't that where life is, that present moment?
yeah. I mean, no, yeah, no. So it's what I was thinking. What's interesting about they talk about its power, that its power is that it can't be opened up, which is like a gator or a croc. You can't pry open its jaw once it's closed. You know what I mean? You can keep it closed.
Who does that sound like?
A lot of people, whenever you're closed off, and as you mentioned therapy. Like I recently was doing this thing called EMDR, which I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but you do this eye movement, and you kind of like induce a REM sleep where you go back to certain memories, and that has shown me like so clearly. I can't even. I mean, it like where every emotion starts to manifest in my body. So I can be aware when it's my mind versus my gut versus my heart sometimes, and like I didn't have the language for that. And
right.
like, and and I like language, but I didn't know when there was a difference going on in between me as to what was causing certain angst. So if you are, uninhibited and you're rageful and vengeful, and that's all you've really seen and known, like there's no doubt it's going to lead you in a dark way, unless your search is for I need to understand better. And like one thing I will say, I only took objection to one word, is you said that we shouldn't be arguing. I think it's okay to argue. I think we have to argue through love. But I know you meant that. I know you meant that. I just
right.
People get scared of an argument, and I'm not scared of an argument. I'm scared that we can't live in a world where people like we should like we're all different. You know what I mean? Like we're different manifestations of the same divine creator, which is great. You know what I mean? Otherwise, super freaking boring.
Right.
But so okay, so I have a question, and I'm curious. Like, so you said you were kind of brought up thinking it was a bit of a sarcastic response. Now, with your own reflection, experience, life, how do you understand what the story and obviously like where that ending leads us to? I'm just kind of curious, like because it's a lot to unpack. And I'm curious, like, okay, yeah, take me through how you break it down. I know it's your show, but I'm curious.
So this is where I am in my life in general. And
Hmm.
I don't know who else is on this path, but when I first started to like really seek more knowledge, what I found, one of the first things I found was how easy it is to want to be a part of a group. So as I started uncovering more truth, I would quickly like attach myself to an idea or a religion or a mythology. Like, oh, that sounds right. So maybe I'm this, maybe I'm Buddhist, or maybe I'm Muslim, or
Right.
all of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until I got to a point to where I studied all of it to see that there's one story being told, but it's being told by different people with different languages, just like how we're talking right now.
Hmm.
So instead of going, well, let me see which one is right, and then all the other ones are just perspective, let me just take all of them as a true perspective of somebody's truth and pick from it whatever resonates with me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, I'm not Christian anymore, but I can still turn on, I can still go to a church. I can still read my Bible because
Right.
everything has truth in it. It's
Hmm.
just about how you're able to process the truth for yourself and not just take somebody else's word for it. And so, with some of the research that I've done, from my understanding, Job is one of the earliest books. If I'm not mistaken, it's the first book to be written or canonized. And I know during that time, a lot of people were not privy to education. Also, occultism, which has nothing to do with dark and spooky stuff. It has something to do with hidden messages. And so I've noticed that all these biblical stories have beautiful hidden messages. And so it's okay. Well, then let me see what kind of hidden messages I can find.
Right.
Also using the language in which it was written to see like what words were they using then and how can I relate it to other cultures? Because what I'm learning in Hebrew is that, in Northern Africa, there was a lot of high learning and high advanced
Yeah.
education going on. And so I'm trying to think like how could somebody just say, "Oh, I'm just going to create a language"? I don't think it works that easy. You know what I mean? I think humanity learned from itself. Like we were just bouncing things off of each other, and then from there, if some things sound familiar, I'm gonna take certain symbols and signs, and I'm gonna take it this way, and you're gonna take it that way. You know what I mean? But we're still coming from that same space. You know what I mean? So,
Oh yeah.
And there's a hippopotamus story in Egypt. And if I'm not mistaken, her name is Ampu. But there's also another hippo goddess. So I'm saying, okay, it's not the first time somebody's told this story about this
Well,
mother energy.
I'll tell you a good one because this was a different paper because this blew my mind because what I've noticed growing up in a Jewish school and then like also like doing a corporate job when I moved to LA, well, sort of semi-corporate, selling solar for Solar City.
Mm-hmm.
You end up getting fed Kool-Aid that you don't even realize it's Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? and you end up getting like told that you are the first, you are the best, you are the only, you are the this, right?
Right.
In solar, it was like, you're the only ones doing this. Then all of a sudden I did it myself and I was like, whoa, I just made way more money selling it my damn self for like one person
Right.
who was like keen on getting so then with Judaism, it was like there's this concept called sota. So a sota is a woman who is married, who
Excuse
is
me, that was,
seen.
real quick. That Taweret is her name, the hippo goddess of
Okay,
ancient Egypt. Go
nice. You got your own fact checker too. That's pretty impressive.
ahead.
So sota is this legal concept that doesn't really ever believe to have occurred, but basically, if a married woman is seen to go into seclusion with another man
Mm-hmm.
and then is brought to court for it, and then it happens again,
Mm-hmm.
and she denies it, she is called a sota, like that's her legal status. And then what they do is they take, and this is why it's never really happened, is because it's very, very severe, is they would take a piece of the parchment of the Torah itself that is about this, and they would burn it out, which is like not
Wow.
a good thing, and they burn it out into ash, put it into a drink, and if she denies that she had, been any philandering, she drinks the drink, and if she's telling the truth, she becomes pregnant, and if she's not, her belly gets distended, and she dies basically, right? So that's like crazy, right? And you learn this, or at least I learned it when I was like, probably in middle school, right? And I go on thinking my whole life, not that I think about it much, but then all of a sudden I'm studying Hinduism in college,
Right.
and they're talking about this goddess Sita. Sounds a
Mm.
lot like sota, right? Literally
Mm.
the changing of a vowel, which in Hindi is the changing of one little mark. So it's almost imperceptible. And anyway, so Sita was a goddess who had just married, I want to say, Ram, and before they, consummated the marriage, she gets kidnapped and she's held captive, and she basically makes a deal with herself that if she doesn't get saved by a certain day, she's going to kill herself, because at that point they're going to have her way with her, and so like it's not worth living.
Mm.
Long story short, she gets saved. They bring her in front of the court, and the court says, you can't have her. There's no way she's still pure, and yada yada yada. And she says, no, like I never slept with this guy. You know what I mean? Like that's never happened. And so then what do they make her do? they light a fire in front of her, and she has to walk through the fire. And what happens
Mm,
if she's telling the truth? The fire god Agni comes and protects her through the fire, and she becomes pregnant.
wow.
If she's lying, she burns in the fire.
Wow.
Sita and Sota. So one was like a story, from the Bhagavad Gita, and one was like more of a legal concept in
Mhm.
the Torah, which is what you're talking about. If you look at how people just use their language or their
Mhm.
culture or whatever, their area, like, I mean, it is literally the same thing. I
Right.
mean, it's like
Even
it's
speaking to Sutta and that I'm not even that familiar with it, but you mentioned fire and
yeah.
soot. But in ancient Egypt, one of the earliest deities, his name is Set, but one of his
Hmm.
names was also Soot. They were talking about
Mm.
soil, but they were also talking about alchemy because coal is the thing that transforms into diamond. So there's a
Yeah. No, I mean, it's and that's like you said, the more you seek knowledge and the more you see the patterns, it does become, I think, almost more difficult to become so like emboldened in your own world. Like, it's hard. I mean, it's very hard because sometimes real tough stuff happens, but it's like, um, but yeah, I think when I heard one guy, it's funny guys on YouTube. I can't remember their names right now, but some guy goes, you got to enter every conversation knowing that you might be wrong. And I was like, that is just like, or every argument or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty brilliant. Like,
right.
it's so
That
true.
definitely keeps you open. Like, you know what? You might just say something that might just change my
Yeah,
mind. You know?
yeah, and that's. I mean, I think it's the way it should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, what other questions you got on the gym? We definitely went on a side rail, but I think it was good.
No, no, no. Oh,
What else you got?
I'll show a picture real quick.
Oh, there you go.
Um,
Little commercial break.
little let's see if okay, maybe
So
this will
you're
work.
studying Hebrew?
But I'll study everything.
Well, are you studying
Um,
so you're learning Hebrew language now?
Um, you can help me with that, but I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
saying that I'm studying it in a way of like I'm really studying it, but no,
Okay. Well, let
yeah,
me know. I
for
can I
sure,
can
man,
help out. I can help you break down some like the tools,
for sure.
especially with biblical Hebrew, because there are good learning tools that you know
Nah,
it gets even deeper.
nah.
Um, yeah. Okay.
This is Power. This is, I guess, will be also Leviathan.
Yeah,
uh,
those things are beastly
yeah, man.
hippos.
And
Uh,
so also cool, man, to see how we all share common themes with nature, and that's something that I didn't get taught in church growing up, but it's a real
mhm.
thing that everything in nature has a reflection about yourself, and that even says it in the Bible. I forgot what verse it is, but God says, study the ants, study the trees, watch how they move, because it's going to show you something about yourself. Like even
Right.
studying stars, because they're giving you signs of times that are going to come, just like checking the weather. But we've gotten so removed from all of those things to where we're searching for it in each other, but each other is trying to search it in here, but in here is a reflection about it. What
Yeah.
you?
Well, well, so you using uh, I use a little wordplay. I think that people often struggle with embracing like the self versus like their own self. I think there's like a big struggle between how do you embrace the fact that you are divine, unique, etc., not become conceited, but also realize that everybody is that way in their own level. And so no matter how pissed off or upset or different or whatever you feel, they really are that thing. So even if now, obviously, if they're violent or there's like an immediate threat, you have to deal with that in a way. But short of that, it's like it's very hard to remember that like as much as I want these things to happen, there's someone else who wants something as bad. You know what I mean? And it's
Right,
and sometimes they've had it worse, or they've had it easier, or they've had it whatever, but yeah, it's like that's a huge. I I think with the Job story, I think it's like meant for you not to really piece it all together. Because I think even the attempt to rationally piece these things together becomes like a fool's errand. Like, I think, like you said, it does become the looking within as best you can, but at the end of the day, like, there's going to be pain sometimes.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think, yeah, I guess if you look at it strictly as a religious text, it's almost impossible to live with,
Mhm.
if you're being intellectually honest about it. But if you can look at it more allegorically, it's like you could do everything right, so to speak,
Right.
and there can still be setbacks, that are going to come your way.
And,
Um, yeah,
and also, what if your idea of right is so different than what your soul's purpose is
mm,
that becomes the Satan in your life? Your false
right,
idea of trying to do right.
yeah,
Because in the book of Job, it says in the beginning, he was perfect. He was the most righteous man. This sounds like a little ego, to be honest with you. Every time he
right,
had a feast, he would do it for his kids. And one way you can look at it and go, oh, he was just a good dad. But another way, because it said he was putting all of, I forgot the word. Maybe you can look it up. But
yeah. I'll go to the beginning.
he was making sacrifices for his children. So he's trying to keep this idea going, and it's almost like he's placing it all on them, and it's not his story. So all of this wealth that you're building is not internal wealth for yourself, it's a lot of external wealth.
Yeah,
And
I mean, yeah, I'm looking at it now. That is an interesting. It's an interesting read of it that I've never thought of, or I don't think I've heard mentioned before. Which is, yeah, that's very interesting, because he's always seems to be described as just successful, but when you actually look at it, it is just describing his wealth
right,
and his displays of wealth.
right. And it's like,
With his
is,
kids.
is
Yeah,
that success? And are we still programmed with the idea that when you have big family, big house, and you got a lot of money, yeah, you're doing right by God? It's like, no, that doesn't mean you're godly at all. That means
right.
you are able to manifest some material wealth. And it's interesting that right after that, Satan comes up and like, man, this dude only like you because he got all this material wealth around it. Take that away. Let's see what he does. But what I found interesting was that at the end, didn't God tell Job's friends? He said, "You guys are speaking wrong about me. This dude
Yeah,
was the only one that got it."
yeah. Right, and that's what makes it, again, almost impossible to reconcile. But it's like, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's a I really like that viewpoint, that he really is displaying his external wealth, um, in conjunction with his spirituality, which is, I guess, saying that he's not a bad guy, but he's got it all, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Satan's saying, and what's interesting also from a character standpoint is when it's taken away. But what is see, that's what I don't understand is, I guess God is sort of testing him to be above human, because how could you have a better response than what he did, to be perfectly honest?
Then what? Who
All
did?
he really, what? Meaning,
Job?
yeah, like, all he really did was accept it, was ask God, why did, I guess the one thing you could say is, like, why to me? Like, that was his, like, his big misunderstanding of it all, is that this is my setback, you
One,
know?
one, one thing that we got taught in church growing up was you never question God. Never challenge him, never ask. God's ways are way beyond yours. You would never be able to conceptualize the way he thinks. And I think in this story, God is saying, no, check my ass, because you're
Yeah,
just as divine as I am. You're my creation. So why would I create you and make you less than me? Why would I make something less than myself? Anytime I create a story, I'm only expressing myself. I cannot express anything less than me. And so, given the idea or the spirit inside of this man that go, you are not just some dude with a lot of nice stuff around you. And maybe getting all this stuff away from you will put you in a place because you get it. People are telling you that, damn, all this stuff has come because you did good and now it's gone because you were bad. You see how everybody around you is thinking? That's not real, bro. And I'm sorry you got to go through this pain, but this pain is alchemy. It's only to produce something higher in you for you to see a bigger picture, that there is something higher going on. And being good is, that's just a tool.
Right.
But it's not
Yeah,
true.
I mean,
There's a deeper truth for you to go to within yourself. There are a lot of people who do good all the time and still have no
right.
idea who they truly are.
That's true. That's true.
And that in itself
Yeah.
can be unintentionally toxic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just very fortunate.
Right.
If this never happens to you, then you're just like, yeah, I mean, I'm
Right.
healthy, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm happy, I'm satisfied with things in life, you know, like those people are harder to find these days, but I'm always like, wow,
Right.
those
Well,
people.
I got a question for you. So in the way you were brought up and how you were taught, did you watch Soul, first of all?
Did we what?
Did you watch Soul?
The movie?
Uh,
Yeah, I will be honest. I fell asleep during it, but just in case you're asking me like a specific part, but I mean I know the gist of it.
no specific part, but
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask you about so a lot of cultures talk about reincarnation, but reincarnation coming because you didn't learn your lesson this life, so you got to come back and figure it out. Where are you with that? Like, because I can see some truth to that. Like, man, we're down here having to learn a lot about ourselves, and if something happens to where we check out of here before we figure it out,
Right.
is it too late to come back and figure it out? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll try to give you my own personal understanding of it, and then I can give you, I guess, a couple different variations of how Jews at large might view it. You know, because there's definitely different, like Hasidic Jews are definitely going to see it differently than the more like German, what they call the Yekish Ashkenazic, like just do what you got to do in this world. Don't worry about anything else. You know what I mean? Like this is, and probably somewhere in between those two is a nice balance. But so for me, I think like I've had to struggle myself with what is the soul, and I think after one of my friends died, to be blunt, it was like that's when I kind of really understood it strongly. It was very sudden. He was like, young guy in shape, just found out that I just found out he had juvenile diabetes, and then 2 days later he had passed away from a seizure, and so no one was expecting it. And my friend came in, and I was like, man, like my freaking, like right here, like in my solar plex, it hurt, and I could feel a certain pain missing. And I asked my friend, I was like, where do you feel it? And he's like, the same thing. And I was like, well, that's pretty odd. Like we feel him who's not there right there. You know what I mean? And I imagine if I would have asked someone else the same thing, they might have felt the same thing. So to me, I was like, well, what does that really mean? Like his physical body is not there, but this person's essence, for whatever reason, is right in that space. So our ideas and our non-physical attributes live forever. I don't know if that means they enter another physical space.
Right.
That to me becomes one of those things where I think people want to come up with that box to explain how these unexplainable elements continue to exist. I can say that I think align with what you're saying. There's definitely a concept in Hebrew. It's called Gilgul Neshama. Like your Gilgul is kind of like a wheel or a cycle. So your soul is cycled through until it basically gets to the point where it needs to get to. There are like,
I can see that.
yeah. No. That's why I was saying, like, I don't want to only say what I think, because I think there are some very nice. And
Yeah.
then, I think, and I think that with that, it's like, which again, to me, like, it just doesn't make any internal logic, but it's to say, like, it has like a 1 to 7 time. It takes like 1 to 7 iterations to essentially cleanse itself, of what it needs to
So
enter.
basically, you gotta go through 7 days of the week.
Well, yeah, a lot of 7. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of 7s in
My
Judaism,
life
for
my
sure.
my my life path number is 7,
Oh yeah,
and we got 7 likes on this show today, so there it
there you
is.
go. Boom. Um, um, yeah, so I would say, like, that's kind of the viewpoint. Reincarnation in and of itself is not it's not the biggest focus. I would say that the resurrection of souls is what's talked about when Mashiach, when Messiah comes.
Mm.
Um, but again, in the schools that I went to, it was like, why are you worried about that? You know what I mean? Like, don't speak poorly about
That's
other
the
people.
pressure, man. I'm worried about it because it says it. I want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it's like, because I don't want to worry about, well, how much money out of my babysitting money or tutoring money that I'm making do I have to give to charity, and how much money, you know what I mean? And like, how, like all that. And like, well, I want to talk shit about my friend, or I want to, like, I don't,
Right.
and
Right.
those are the things that you really need to be, I think, obviously mindful of. But yeah, so it's, the soul is, to me, it's just what makes us, you know, us, both on an individual and collective level. And I think it's a shame that we, again, lose sight of that duality within it. Um, and it's funny that this is the one thing that, my Judaism is nebulous at times, especially if you ask a Jew, based on the way I observe or don't observe,
Mm.
but I definitely have learned a lot. And then I've learned a lot from other religions, like you. And in college, I tried to study as much as I could. And then if I could travel somewhere, I would try to do that, and actually learn, because what else is the point? And
Right.
talk to people. Um, and, and there, the rabbi who's credited as like founding the part of Judaism that I grew up in, which is called modern Orthodoxy. So it's, think about the old school Jews, but then like living in the regular world, and but still keeping everything. I'm probably more on the modern side of that these days,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
but uh, but he he was the other text I read in conjunction with Job for my thesis, actually. But he starts off one of his like philosophical books, which you need like a philosophical dictionary specifically for them. They're amazing. And he starts off and he says, like, many people join a religious community or spiritual community going to give them comfort, because
Mm.
you look at the church, you look at a synagogue, people look at Jews and they think Jews have it all, and it's like, man, you got to look about 2 more layers deep to see, like, some Jews some Jews seem to have it all. Everyone, you know what I mean? It's like everyone, like, it's and it's an interesting thing, and everyone looks. But what he says is, the more you study, the way harder your questions with God get. They're very surface level when you just kind of like, oh, well, what do you do about this? And, oh, what do you do? And then they're like, well, God did this. And even as we're talking about what God says to Job, it's like, well, how the hell do you reconcile that theoretically God said, if you do everything right, you're going to be okay? And then Satan is able to tempt God into this weird bet, like a literal bet, you know, to ruin this guy's one life that he gets in that body, all because, and then for him to have, in my opinion, a very reasonable response It's like it's like how if you're being honest about this, like how do you possibly deal with it? And so like the book that I read was he lost his wife, this rabbi lost his wife and both of his parents all within a year.
Mm.
Like I mean that's
You're supposed to be able to go through grief through that.
yeah.
Wow. So what is
Yeah.
that story really saying? Is it saying that you're not supposed to like care about none of this stuff?
But no, I don't believe it. I just think that's the hard thing is like how do you care? You know, I know and I'm sure you've had your own personal tragedies. And I'm curious actually, when those happen to you. I know for me, I had a moment when I was a teenager with my brother where, like, thank God I had a lot of support around me, but it was like, I understand right now that this is where people they make a decision. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, that decision could be very negative because they're making a decision out of pain,
Mm-hmm.
or it's like I loved this person or this thing or this, you know, whatever it was to you. And now that it's gone and it hurts, it means that that's because of love. It means that you're in pain because you can't experience that anymore. So to end that experience to me was like, that doesn't make any sense. And it would be like a disgrace to the whole reason why I'm feeling this way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Oh,
like a whole reason.
okay,
Sorry.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So, um, yeah, growing up where I'm from, like I said, the graveyard's full.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, I've been to almost 20 funerals in my life. Experienced a few grandmothers, which that was the hardest. Those were the hardest ones. The grandmas, oh man, it's heartbreaking. It's also heartbreaking when it's a classmate too. I've had
Yeah. When they're young. Yeah.
a few friends get shot and killed.
Hmm.
And one funeral I went to a few years ago, a close friend of mine, man, it was only like 4 classmates there. I'm like, damn, that sucks. But what I knew, what I'm noticing is that nobody teaches us how to process death. And man, it strikes you, man, and it lingers on for a long time if nobody teaches you how to deal with it because it hurts, you know. Um,
How
especially
did your family deal with it?
coping mechanisms, either
Yeah.
suppressing emotions and trying to pretend that they're not there, or
Well,
reaching out.
after the funeral, what happens? Like,
We eat a
like
bunch of
after the
fried
funeral,
chicken and laugh,
yeah. Okay.
and then everybody dissipates.
Yeah.
That's about
So
it.
I'll say this, and I saw this with my friend who, you know, who I mentioned who passed suddenly because he's like, you know, I was in Australia then, and this guy, like Italian, you know, named Gino, and in Judaism, even if you're not that religious, they do this thing called Shiva, you know, which you sit for 7 days,
Mhm.
7, and you literally, as the immediate family, you sit, like not on a couch, you sit on the floor or something like a foot or so off the ground. You don't shower, you cover up all your mirrors, and people bring you meals, and you just talk and you pray. You know, you pray in the house, like, you know, like the daily prayers and whatnot. Um, and you talk and you share. And then on Shabbat itself, like on the weekend, then you can like wash and you can like be, you know, ready. But then, you know, you're back until your 7 days are up. And what I have found is it's the best way to not just experience the pain for one day and one moment and then
Mhm.
pretend like it's not there. It's like everybody's there
Mhm.
through for like a little bit of time where you then actually are ready to like literally stand up, you know, and we're
Mm.
kind of you know, we're sort of forced to like, well, just move to the next thing, you know.
Right.
And when it's a real tragedy that, you know, that affects you, like you have to sit and like you said earlier, like you have to sit in the pain, and you know, and don't look at yourself in the mirror. You know what I mean? Just talk about the
Right.
person, talk about the memories. um, and I think Hinduism has some similarities as well in their grieving process. Like it's pretty, well defined, which I think is huge. Like, just give yourself time. Try to keep your friends and your family close for a little while longer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As best you can.
And,
'Cause then, yeah,
and part of it, the other part of it is giving people more not accurate, because nobody knows what happens when you leave, but
hmm
giving information to support the idea of you never lose anything. Like when somebody leaves, it's hard for us to really have that conversation right now because we've been programmed our whole life that when somebody passes away, they're gone, and that's why it
right,
hurts, because we won't get it. But if we were taught from an early age that if they leave that body, it's just the body they left. The essence is still here, and they
yeah,
might even come back in another body. So you just have to be in tune with everything around you, and
right,
they're still here. And so even just having like ideas like that, whether they're real or not, will take away so many fearful ideas about what death is, and that will take away a lot of the stress and the trauma that comes with it.
yeah,
If you have a story or a narrative to tell yourself that it's just a transition, which actually should be celebrated. And so what are you crying about if this person has gotten their wings, But man, it's hard in that moment. It's like, but I had expectations to, do this. When my cousin passed away, bro, one thing I was hurt by was like, damn, but he has such a beautiful voice. He could sing. So wait, are you just gonna pass that voice off to somebody else?
right,
um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
So I
well,
definitely uh-huh.
well, and I think this goes back to that balance, which is like, on the flip side, though, you have to really value the life when it's there. You
Exactly.
can't take it, whether it's yours or someone else's. You need to, again, for all the things that you feel, someone else feels that, in their own way, for their own people, their own family, their own love, their own friend, their own whatever. You know what I mean? And we have to, like, scary part of the screens and the masks and all that is, like, we just become more removed from that contact, that real contact that we really need, and that it felt like we were going closer to, you know what I mean? Or maybe you and I, because we're kind of hopeful
Right,
people, and, like,
right.
but it's like, yeah, well, oh, good, this was good. So how do we where do we take it from here?
Well, now we're on the road, man. We can either end it, or I'll say this to just put an end on this note about that transition, and appreciating people while they're here.
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with that, because that's the other thing. If we come into this reality and not have so many expectations of so many years far in the future, then when something what seems to be tragic happens, it won't strike us that much, because part of it is you having to remove all these future plans you had. And if if the whole time you were only just being present and just experiencing the
Mm,
moment and saying, you know what, I'm just going to appreciate this moment. It might end right now. I don't know. But if it does, I appreciate it. When it does end, obviously we're going to feel pain. Like you said, that's something we're not going to get away from. In order for us to know what love feels like or know what pleasure feels like, we got to experience the pain. But the pain doesn't have to rock us in a way to where we don't know how to deal with it, if we can have some tools to support us in our journey and to navigating through that pain. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And being fully present and appreciating a person in the moment and letting go of the expectations. That's one tool that has helped me, because, like, so if something happens, I'm not rocked by it. I will feel, because I will miss and I will mourn,
hmm
but I won't have my reality. It's almost like when you tell a kid that Santa Claus not real. It's like you're rocking their reality, and they have
Right.
to deprogram and now reprogram a new thought. And so, I'm teaching myself because I'm a creative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's so easy for me to paint pictures of the future, which has burned me so many times, especially romantically. You paint all these pictures when you fall in love at first. You're like, oh, we gotta do this. And then when you break up, a lot of the pain is, damn, I gotta like reverse all those ideas I thought we were about to experience.
It's so much, and Los Angeles is an even tougher place to reprogram that part of your life. But you made me think of not setting these expectations, and I'll quote my dad on this one. Probably one of the most heartbreaking and profound things, I think. He's also a good writer, but when he was speaking at my brother's funeral, he said, we all wanted, my brother's name was Ari, we all wanted Ari to be around for a long time, but God just, needed him more. And so it was like his time wasn't ours to dictate. So we had and especially for a parent, I think it's like you have in order to even survive is you have to get over all of those things so fast, because it's like, their other sons are going to grow up, their other sons are going to do this, and it's like, it's tough, but he was right on then. Yeah.
Heart to your family, man. We've all experienced loss, and so any type of empathy I can offer,
I know thank God we're doing great, but again, you live, like I'm saying, you live with them, and they can become things that again bring you down. Nothing really keeps you the same. I don't believe that. If you're staying the same, you're going down. But otherwise, hopefully you use that as, and like I know you do. I try to do is bring not yourself up only, but hopefully you'll be strong enough to help others around you. You know what I mean? And I think that's like the goal. Otherwise you're gonna end up talking to God again, and he's gonna drop the mic on you, and you're gonna be like,
I
didn't think of
words.
I was like, I didn't think about all that.
Cool, man. Well,
nice, man.
This has been a great conversation.
Likewise.
Right.
It was awesome.
The dome,
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to come back for anything else that you feel I can chat about. But this was awesome. I mean, I wish we could hang out, but this is good for now.
Right.
You're in Los Angeles though, right?
Yeah, I'm out here.
Okay, you didn't go back home or anything?
Not yet.
All right.
Not yet. Because LA is a mess, man. Like, when is it gonna open back up?
I know. At least, well, we'll see. Another that's another episode.
That's another episode. Right.
Cool, man.
I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll definitely be on here again.
Yeah.
It's a great conversation, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate
the
support, and we'll see you all again soon.
Peace. Goodbody 7. Thank you. Support.
Hey, no problem. Bye.